All right, who dat? What's up, everybody? We are live. Appreciate you guys joining me today. Lots to talk about. There's been a lot of Saints news, and obviously with the combine going on and the needs that this roster has, the timing could be more perfect to get really some tremendous sound bites from Mickey Loomis, from Jeff Ireland, really getting into the process. I thought Nick Underhill, John DeShazier, and a couple others really asked some terrific questions that really got into the process, how they approach things. And I thought this was a game changer in terms of news for us and kind of setting up what to expect from here on out. So, hey, thank you guys for joining me. Jerry Poor Jr., aka the OG, thanks for being here. My dad's here, calling me the tape eater already. So good morning to you guys. Thanks for joining. Hopefully we'll have a number of other people in here soon. We are live for Morning Cocktail. As always, please smash that like button and don't forget to share this. And if you're not a patron already, the time is now. Free agency is about to hit. We're going to be covering this wall to wall. Kenneth, good morning. Thanks for joining, man. All right, so look, obviously we have a lot of news to cover over last night, and so I'm going to spend about 15 minutes during the show kind of covering it all, and I'll answer any questions you guys have and try to address any comments you have. Corey, good morning. Thanks for joining. So obviously the combine is a big deal for the Saints, and I want to start with Mickey Loomis's comments, which I found really interesting. Obviously, he addressed quarterback, and he said, "Hey, hopefully." We're on Jameis Winston's short list. He's certainly on ours, and we're considering him, but there's a lot of urgency to figure out quarterback. And what that tells me is that they're maybe not planning to draft a guy, that they want to get a veteran. Jameis and Teddy have both been the big names that have been floated out. I think if the Saints lose out on Jameis, and he is expected to have suitors, is what I'm told, then they're going to quickly go to Teddy, and that would be number 2. So we'll see how that plays out. That's worth paying attention to. But when you look at the receiver room, and look, this is no surprise. We've talked about this being a huge need, something that we want to get bolstered in the offseason. We talked about how bad that receiver group was a year ago. I thought a couple comments were really interesting. First, Mickey Loomis basically came out and said it. He said, look, this receiver room, we've got some work to do. And we've got some guys to add. So he was very clear about that. He mentioned that Traquan Smith is a free agent. He mentioned that Deontay Harris is a restricted free agent. I tend to think Deontay, they're going to do what they can to bring him back. Traquan Smith, I'm not so sure. And so, you know, as you got deeper into the interview, I thought another comment that was really interesting was that Jeff Ireland said, hey, here's the thing about receiver. You can get a good one in really almost any round. He said, I'm not worried about getting a receiver because like they're available and you can get quality guys that can help you right away at a lot of different spots in the draft. I thought that was an interesting comment that maybe made it feel like they won't force receiver in the first round. And I'm going to get to that more in a minute as we talk about RAS scores and how some of these guys performed at the combine. But the other thing that Mickey Loomis said that I thought was really interesting was that, you know, it used to be 4 years ago, that when you draft a receiver, probably further back, when you draft a receiver, it takes them 3 years to develop. It really takes them 3. We saw that with Devery Henderson. We saw that with Meacham to a degree. When these receivers get picked, it takes them a while to acclimate to the NFL and understand what the team needs them to do. And Mickey Loomis said that's really no longer the case. There's so many receivers that get drafted and in year one contribute immediately. And I think that's a testament to college and high school going 7-on-7, a lot more passing. Teams are kind of done running the ball. The advances that college football has made passing are substantial. And so it's developed the skill of all these receivers. Another interesting tidbit. And so this receiver draft, by the way, is very deep. Tons and tons of receivers in this class. So do I think the Saints will pick a receiver in this draft? 100%. And they might go for more than one, honestly. Another tidbit here is, remember, a lot of these guys stayed an extra year in college because of the COVID rules. And so there's a lot of 24, 25-year-old rookies. And there are 700 more players available in this draft than there were a year ago. 700. And so Mickey Loomis kind of said, look, it might be more valuable to have an extra 5th-round pick this year. He's like, the UDFA market is going to be way more popping than it was a year ago. And I think those are accurate statements, obviously, just by sheer numbers. So there's a lot of guys, I think, in this class that are going to be interesting. And when you talk about last year and how poor, remember how poor that UDFA class was, not only for the Saints, but really just league wide. I just think it was a draft kind of devoid of talent, not enough players. A lot of guys deferred entering the draft until this year. So the draft is absolutely loaded. And the more picks you have, in my opinion, the better. So let's talk about the combine for a minute. I do think the Saints would potentially look at free agents at wide receiver, but they're not going to spend big bucks. They're already spending big bucks on Michael Thomas. They expect to have him back. So I don't see them spending a ton. Like someone, Kenneth, you just mentioned Jarvis Landry. To me, that's just going to be too expensive. I mean, I would love to get Jarvis Landry in a Saints uniform. DJ Chark, we talked about him a little bit on the show. He's coming off an injury. He would be a potentially promising receiver, but the Jaguars could easily offer him $12, $13 million a year, where, that starts to get a little too expensive for the Saints. So it's possible that they go out in free agency and add a guy, but I just think that old Ted Ginn offer of 3 years, $15 million, that's probably the price point that the Saints would be playing in. And I don't know what that's going to land them. So a lot of it's just going to depend on what the receiver market looks like. But now when we turn our attention to the draft, and I will give this caveat, okay? The combine, it's the underwear Olympics. You always have to go back to the tape. To me, that's the governing body over how good these players are. If you get lost in what's this guy's 40 time, what's this guy's, shuttle drill score, how much did he bench press? Those, I feel like that is ancillary information that is helpful in evaluating a player. When you're on the fence between a couple guys, that can be a deciding factor. So you definitely want to pay attention to it. And to Jeff Ireland's point, they have their minimums. So you got to be above the minimum for the Saints to consider drafting you. So those are important things, I think, overall. But here's the bottom line when you look at these RAS scores. It's the underwear Olympics. So it's important to give that caveat. Now, that being said, when you look at the performance of the receivers yesterday, and this is where you start to get really excited, there's 7 guys that ran sub 4.40s. So the speed in this class at receiver is absolutely insane. And that should really excite you, because that means there's a lot of viable products out there. Now, interestingly, when you look at Raz, and I mean, Yannick, you say Raz is not accurate or not what you want to do, but listen, this is how the Saints evaluate players. So whether you like Raz or not, that's their process. Don't blame the messenger here. I'm just telling you how the Saints kind of evaluate that. But Chris Olave ran a 4.39 40. He went to Ohio State, but if you look at his RAS score, he's at 7.83. This is out of 10, by the way. Anything above 9 is considered excellent. And look, we know his size was going to be underwhelming, especially his weight. And that was kind of my concern all along with the Ohio State guys. Garrett Wilson, who most people feel is the number 1 receiver in this draft class. Chris Olave, just a little bit behind him. But both of those guys, we knew they were going to be light in the pads. We knew they were going to be small. So they really needed to tear it up in terms of the speed and agility stuff. And Chris Olave had a really poor vertical. His broad jump was not great. It was just okay. And so his RAS score of 7.8, I think, even though he was blazing fast, I think is a little disappointing. Garrett Wilson ran a 4.38, same thing. His explosion grade was not as good. And so he's actually a little bit lower on the RAS scale at 7.64. Now, I do think both of these guys will be good NFL players, especially Olave, his route running ability, their ability to shake loose of other guys. They're not just fast and straight line. You can just tell the way they run routes, these guys can get open. But my concern, and it's really with both of them when you talk about 187-pound and 183-pound receivers, is durability. Can they take hits? Can they catch 80 passes in a season in the last 17 games? And that's the big question mark with these two. So I would say Garrett Wilson and Olave, my concerns that I've had with these two players all along remain the same. Treylon Burks of Arkansas, His RAS score is 6.32. Very disappointing for him. We knew he had the weight. We knew he had the size. He kind of bombed his explosion, not a very good vertical, and his 40 time was only 4.55. So that was disappointing. And then again, Jahan Dotson, another guy, Ohio State, his is all the way down to 5.94. He had a really poor 3-cone score. And obviously, we know he's very small as a receiver. He's only 178 pounds, 5'10". But he did run a 4.43. So tons of speed. But I would say if you look at some of these guys at the top of the draft, these guys that are supposed to be number one picks in the first round, they all kind of had disappointing RAS scores. And it's actually some of these other receivers. And so this kind of goes at what Jeff Ireland was saying. We can find a receiver anywhere in the draft. In the second, look, they picked Michael Thomas in the second round. Colston was in the 7th round. Thank you, Kenneth. But if you look at even Kenny Stills, like I don't want to talk about Kenny Stills last year. That's not the player I'm talking about. But they drafted him in the 5th round, and in year 1, Kenny Stills had almost 1,000 yards for the Saints. Lance Moore and Willie Snead were undrafted guys. So the Saints have found ways to be successful with receivers other than first-round picks. And if anything, I would say Brandon Cooks was good. Robert Meacham, probably a little disappointing considering where he was picked. But I would say that picking receivers in the first round has maybe not been a home run for the Saints compared to some of these other guys they've landed. So, and now you start to look at some of the other guys, with just enormous RAS scores. And would the Saints maybe look in other rounds at picking these guys? Isaiah Weston of Northern Iowa, 9.98. Christian Watson of North Dakota State, 9.98. A lot of you guys are talking about Alec Pierce of Cincinnati. That was Desmond Ritter's go-to target, 9.78. Everyone is talking about Tyquan Thornton of Baylor, 9.71. There's a number of guys here, and obviously where they get drafted is going to go way up. Isaiah Weston of Northern Iowa, 4.42 40 time. He's over 6 foot. He's 250 pounds. His vertical is 40 inches. I mean, just insane athlete. Christian Watson of North Dakota State, he crushed everything. I mean, he's already got the height. He's got the speed. He's got the vertical. Insane stuff. Alec Pierce out of Cincinnati, 6'3", 211 pounds, 40.5-inch vertical, 4.41 speed. Just insane. Some of these guys, and then of course everyone's talking about Tyquan Thornton. He ran a 4.28 out of Baylor, blazing fast, by far the fastest player at the combine. And look, this is just the beginning. Really, we only have RAS scores for about 30 receivers, and there's a whole group that either didn't do certain workouts, so like it's TBD, and after their pro days, we'll update those scores. And I think this receiver class is absolutely nuts. You have size, you have speed, you have depth. And I'll be honest, I don't think, and look, this is temporary. Again, like I don't want to lose my mind over these scores because I think the tape is the ultimate thing. And look, I think if anything, the Saints lean towards the RAS stuff harder the last couple of years because of COVID. Remember, they weren't really able to interview these guys other than Zoom calls. They were limited in the number of Zoom calls they could have. It was much, much more difficult to evaluate players. You couldn't have them come in for visits. So I think the game has changed. Like COVID protocol has been removed league-wide. The NFLPA and NFL have decided that. And so the ability to kind of go one step further in your evaluation is going to be ramped up this year. And so I think the Saints may dial back their RAS commitment just a tad. And that's because they'll be able to do the interviews. They'll be able to do the tape. And we talk about this all the time. What do the Saints look for in a draft pick? They want them to be smart. They want them to love football, so be committed to it. They want them to be hard workers, right? Smart. And they want them to be athletic. Those are kind of the traits that they look for. And so, that's something that a lot of that stuff is something that you figure out in the interview room. And so I think the ability to do that and take that a step further may relax the RAS stuff a little bit because they may justify like, hey, I'm okay with this guy based on his mental makeup, based on this. He's maybe a little bit low on his 3-cone or a little bit short, but like everything else I love. He nailed the interview. He fits our culture. And so I think they may make more exceptions based on those parameters, which they'll be able to dive into a little bit more this year. So that's a factor. But Corey's saying the Saints are going to draft 3 receivers. I think it'll depend on how free agency goes, right? That happens first. I still think Deontay, getting him back is a priority. Maybe you sign one guy if you lose Traquan, and then you draft a guy too. And then I think the receiver room is solid because you got Michael Thomas coming back. I still like Callaway. And I think then your receiver room is transformed, honestly. I think you'd be in a really good spot. But look, again, with the draft, I think if anything, the guys at the top, they ran good 40 times, so that helps them. But I still have the same questions. And so I think the guys at the top, I think there's more justification in waiting, honestly, after this combine, because now you start to feel like, wow, there's a lot of depth, there's a lot of talent. You can get a guy in the 2nd round, in the 3rd round, in the 4th round, 5th round that could maybe play and contribute for you day one. These guys are that good. And so you have to ask yourself, I still think Olave, Garrett Wilson, we haven't even talked about Jameson Williams because he's recovering from an ACL. He's going to drop because of that injury, but he's obviously a terrific prospect. I still think those are the best guys, but if they don't have the bodies to be NFL players, are they going to have the longevity, right? Are they going to get banged up? So those are things that you have to decide, like, is it worth getting an explosive guy that you may only get 10 games out of? Those are all things you have to evaluate. So, hey, this was great. Thank you guys so much. Hope you enjoyed this. This was a talk about the wide receiver room. It's clear to me when you look at what Ireland has said, what Mickey Loomis has said, they are all in on revamping this receiver group because it was dismal last year. An interesting theory I had with Ralph, actually, real quick, when we talked about this was I would not be surprised to see the Saints spend money on a receiving tight end, whether that's Njoku, Evan Ingram. I think a lot of teams are interested in him. You can get a really talented guy that can give you plays in the slot and spend a little bit less than you would at a receiver. So maybe they address that by getting a receiving tight end, spending a little bit less money because tight end comes a little cheaper than getting a high flight receiver. And then you double down in the draft. And like I said, maybe draft 2, or as Corey said, maybe 3 guys. So, hey, thanks for all your comments. Again, I don't have too many likes yet. What's up with that? Come on, smash that like button before you leave. Please hit that. That really helps with the YouTube algorithm, helps us out a lot. Visit our website, saintshappyhour.com, and please consider becoming a patron. Thank you guys so much for the support. We'll be coming out with more of these as free agency hits because it's going to go nuts and it's going to come fast and furious. So we'll be doing our daily podcast covering all the breaking news. So you know where to find us. Saints Happy Hour. Thanks, guys. Who dat?